Let's take a look at this first story, which basically contradicts everything the activists have said up until, I guess, this point. From the Daily Mail, America's largest teachers union backs teaching critical race theory to children, says it will fight those who oppose the move, and calls for October rally to commemorate George Floyd's birthday. So this is it. We've heard over and over again that no one's teaching critical race theory in schools. It was a semantic game. What they were actually doing was they call it praxis, theory and practice. So they weren't teaching you the writings of, say, Kimberly Crenshaw. They were applying the ideology that she had written about into the teachings of these schools, and they're using derivative writings or ideologies like anti-racism and critical white studies to indoctrinate your children. Now the cat's out of the bag. The National Educators Association announced it is backing the teaching of critical race theory in schools. The country's largest teachers union approved a resolution to promote critical race theory and assemble a team to teach it to union members. It also wants to assemble a staff to take on those who challenge its plans to promote CRT. In addition to its plans, the NEA will launch a national day of action on October 14th, George Floyd's birthday, to have a dialogue on systemic racism. As of June 29th, 26 states have introduced bills or taken steps to restrict teaching critical race theory. It is unclear how the NEA's plan to teach CRT will be implemented in such states. I gotta say, I read some history. I am not optimistic. We are repeating. Humans are repeating themselves in this regard. If you look back to the 1920s and what was going on in Germany, I know it's extremely cliche to invoke Godwin's law and say, oh, they're just like the Nazis. They're not, in the sense that they believe the same things, although actually they kind of do. Racial identitarianism. But you take a look at what happened in the 20s, what happened with, Hitler being this what do they call him, the leader of the reactionary extremists. And then eventually he won over the country. And the reason he did it, in his own words, is that he indoctrinated children.
Right.
So now that's what we're seeing. So here's where there's some optimism, though. Steve Bannon said on this show, what was it, a week or so ago, that we are going to win. We're going to defeat this Marxist ideology, the critical race theorists, and the establishment. Just take a look at what's happening in Loudoun County with these parents who are fighting back against critical race theory. When these moms start seeing what's being taught to their children, they're going to wake up. And then he likened it to the French Revolution.
Yeah.
He said once the women, the wives, came out, that was it.
Right.
That it was over. They marched down to the palace. They took, the king, the queen, or whatever.
Yeah.
So maybe what we're seeing now with the work you're doing, Asra, and all these books you have to show us is it's cause for hope.
Yeah, I mean, it is cause for hope because we got fed up. We just decided, okay, we've got our, carpool that we got to do. We got to make dinner. We got to make a living. But we're not going to let garbage go into our kids' minds. And so that's what happened in my life. And I know that every parent that I speak to is equally motivated. There's, nothing that will stand between a parent and their child, because love is what connects us, and it's existential. This is a being that you brought into this world. You can lose a lot in this life. You can lose a job, you can lose a home, but when your child is in threat of being taken from you in spirit and in mind, there's nothing that's going to stop you.
We saw this viral story last year where when they started doing Zoom courses, the kids were now doing remote teaching. There was a leaked video. Apparently some teacher was like, I'm really worried what's going to happen if the parents find out what we're teaching their kids.
Right.
And then the parents found out what was being taught to their kids.
Yeah, we listen. And you know what happens is we're just shocked because all of a sudden you have entrusted the school system with your kid's life. And now you see that, in fact, your child's future is threatened because they may end up in this very regressive mindset. And that's troubling. And so from New York City to Beaverton, Oregon, we've got parents that are standing up. We've got teachers. What we've done at Parents Defending Education is created a little portal. And in that portal, people report to us their tips. And we put their tips, we investigate them. I've been a journalist 30 years, and I do the reporting. And we all do the reporting. We've got Erica in Rhode Island. We've got Marissa here in Virginia. We've got Nikki in Virginia also, and parents all over the country that are part of our movement. And We're putting them up on the map so that everybody knows in every school district what's going on.
Something crazy that I think people are familiar with the higher profile battles that are happening. Loudoun County being one of the biggest. You have these parents that they're in these videos, they're going viral.
Yeah.
Because effectively what's happening is these schools are teaching children that they either are oppressed or oppressors.
Right.
Which is basically Marxist theory and critical theory. And they're saying, which is basically the same thing, but I digress. They're saying to these kids, like minorities, you will never succeed. You can't succeed. You're oppressed. It'll never happen.
Yeah.
And there's no solution offered up to that ideology. You tell someone you will always fail. Have a nice day.
Yeah. And so you're creating that bigotry of low expectations for minorities. And then Asians, when we say, actually, we like math, and our kids are good at math. and they go into the STEM schools, like my son's school. We're the inconvenient minority, right? And then they want to dismiss us as white adjacent. And that's,
or just white now.
Yeah,
exactly.
They don't even bother.
They say whiteness is this critical race theory, that it's a property, that it's a tangible thing owned by people, and that if you're accepted, then basically Asian people can be white. Now, here's the funny thing. Our friend Luke, who is Luke Rutkowski, who is on the show every so often, he has blonde hair and blue eyes. Mm-hmm. He is white, but he's Slavic. So according to the Coalition for Communities of Color, they say that he's a person of color as a Slavic individual. Blonde hair, blue-eyed white guy.
Yeah. Because ultimately, though, the identity shouldn't be defined by these abstract ideas. And speaking of whiteness, this is one of those books that's actually sold and taught to elementary school kids called Not My Idea. The most startling page is this one.
Now, this is in schools.
This is in schools.
Christopher Rufo tweeted about this.
Yeah. This is one of those books. It's taught in Pennsylvania. It's taught in Texas. And
what is it? Let me read some of this. Whiteness is a bad deal. It always was. Dude, we can see your pointy tail. What does that mean?
Go to the next page.
It says, contract, binding you to whiteness. You'll get stolen land, stolen riches, special favors. Whiteness gets, quote, checkmark, to mess endlessly with the lives of your friends, neighbors, loved ones, and all fellow humans of color. For the purpose of profit, your soul, sign below. Land, riches, and favors may be revoked at any time for any reason.
And the pointy tail
is on a white man.
Is on the devil.
Yeah.
The contract with the devil. And that's what whiteness has. And this is going to third graders. Can you imagine that a third grader has to process?
9-year-olds.
Yeah. Basically, this kind of garbage. It's really toxicity.
That's amazing. I mean, when I was a kid, we didn't learn. These are complicated concepts to teach a child.
Yeah. And if you want to talk about colonization and you want to talk about, some of these moments from history, you don't associate it then with this every white child that exists in classrooms today. It's really
it's funny how none of it makes sense, to be completely honest. I mean, they say Asians are white adjacent, then they say Asians are actually white, then they say stop Asian hate.
Right. Because they got to do their virtue signaling,
mm-hmm.
right? They got to act like they care, but ultimately they don't care because they're out to destroy Asians' pursuit of merit. Exactly.
Yeah, it's what is it about Asians that they get lumped in with whiteness? And perhaps it's the stereotype of the stern Asian parent telling their child to work harder. Are you a doctor yet? You're not. Why not? Keep studying.
Yeah.
And that's the joke. And they don't like the idea that I suppose that people pass down studiousness. I don't think it's racial.
Right.
I think it's cultural.
Yeah.
And I think what we're really talking about right here is they call it cultural Marxism. But I think it's very communistic in the sense that they don't want you to believe you can succeed. Because then what happens? You're dependent upon the government.
Right.
You're dependent upon some external structure or system to provide for you because you're oppressed. You can't do it.
Right.
In that book, when they mention that contract with whiteness,
yeah.
Do they offer up any positives of how to succeed and how to overcome being oppressed?
Well, you have to get rid of your whiteness, first of all, as a human being. And then you have to say that racism is what brought you down, right? And you have to have this acknowledgement of that. And then
that is very culty.
Yeah, it is very culty. And this is all the books and literature of a cult. And that's what I think is parallel in what you said about Nazism. I mean, I've heard you also talk about how critical race theory, isn't the concept that we should put out there. We should just call it wokeism, right?
Well, yeah.
I mean, whether it's true or not, like it's an ism, it's an ideology. And that's what got me into this because as a journalist, I'm always looking at ideas and how they're sold and how they're marketed out in the world. And that's what I then realized, is that there's this multi-million-dollar industry pushing this ideology and into our schools.
Spineless corporations to see a quick buck, quick buck, and in a book, willing to push it. Yeah, I say wokeness because critical race theory has some specific ideas, and there are derivative ideas that don't rest inside the writings of critical race theorists, like and they use these semantic games to manipulate. So perhaps identitarianism might be a better way to describe it. And the reason I like saying identitarianism, it's effectively the etymology is identity plus government, form of government.
Yeah.
So you have government on the basis of race.
Right.
Granted, it's very vague considering everything they're talking about, because it's deeper than just government or policy. But they're very much so pushing a way of life and policy based on your race. Very much so like the Nazis did. And so if you want to find that common factor between the authoritarian groups, do they hold the same economic views? No, of course not. Right. And it becomes very silly when people say, oh, so-and-so's a fascist. It's like, the fascists had specific views on the state and corporations, and the Nazis had very specific views on race. Authoritarianism is the better word, but that's really broad. The thing that binds these with the similar with what we've seen in the past 100 years is racial identitarianism combined with authoritarianism. I don't care what kind of economic system you have if you're an authoritarian in the first place, and then outside of that, race-based authoritarianism is just a million times freakier.
Yeah, and I fit really well in the oppression matrix because I'm a Muslim. I'm a woman. I'm an immigrant. I lived in poverty when my family moved to America. Grew up in West Virginia. And so I could make out pretty well, right, in this suffering.
Yes.
But the reason why I care is because this ism that really woke me up, that was in my life, was Islamism, which is the political Islam. So as a Muslim, I grew up with a very progressive interpretation of the faith. I didn't grow up with thinking that I had to cover my hair. I brought as another show and tell this doll who looks like a typical Barbie, but when she arrived, her name is Fula, and she had her hair covered. She was wearing the black abaya that women have to wear, right, in Saudi Arabia. And you'll see that I took her to vote with me one day. I got her the voting sticker because, women have been denied the vote in these Islamist countries. So there's being a Muslim, and then there's believing in Islam that is about your identity and about politics. It has to be in governance. And so for the last 20 years after 9/11, I've been fighting that extremism. And that's where I really understood this identity politics divides people. It's dangerous. It kills people. And that's why I know that the battle we're in is so important.
And there's an interesting point to be made too with identity politics. There's sort of a positive identity politics and a negative identity politics. And I think it's hard to know exactly where the dividing line is. Certainly we view the Civil Rights Act as a good thing. You can't discriminate on the basis of race. What we don't like is identity politics where they say you must discriminate on the basis of race. So that's what I've run into with many of these left personalities. They're like, aha, when you say Civil Rights Act, you're playing identity politics. And I'm like, I'm saying you can't use someone's race to discriminate. Yeah. And then they say you can. But here's what's really fascinating though. They then say you can't discriminate on the basis of sex. They say it's a really confusing thing, to be completely honest, but maybe we'll get into it in a second. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.